All right, so keep in mind we have our second evaluation tomorrow. I know this probably looks a little strange standing to the side here, but we got that desk that's a little bit in the way. Got a pretty good view from this side. So we've done this part of the axial skeleton, okay? Then we're moving on with the rest of the axial skeleton, which means it's everything, it's kind of provides a scaffolding for the body, okay? Because next week we get into the appendicular skeleton, which is your arms, your legs, and how these appendages attach to the central scaffolding. And that's why when you're looking at your pelvic cavity that you see there, the what's called the ilium, the ischium, and the ischial tuberosity, that's the three bones that make up your pelvis. Okay, it's what actually the legs fit into, and that's why it's appendicular, not axial. Sorry? Oh, I thought you had a question. Oh, okay. So we'll just start from the top down. Okay? So, sorry, I got to do this. That just, well, what's significant about these two? Not only what type of vertebrae are they? They are cervical, okay? And there's something that they all have in common in the front, okay? It's called the body of the vertebrae, okay? Then these two have a specific name to them, specific cervical. Okay, so what's significant about these is if you had these vertebrae sitting out, how would you know which one's which? Okay, even if you started to disassemble parts of this vertebral column, how would you know you're looking at a lumbar or a cervical or a thoracic vertebrae? Exactly, because as you get lower in the spinal column or the vertebral column, the larger they get. But that wouldn't really answer how would you be able to tell the difference between the atlas and the axis when you're looking at the cervical vertebrae. And it has something to do with the skull. Yes, but can you name the structures though? In both the skull and the vertebral column. Well, the magnum foramen is just the hole that the spinal column would go through, but when we look at underneath here, you're in the general vicinity, okay? Here's your foramen magnum that you're talking about, but it's on the sides here. What they're condyles, but what are they called though? Yeah, the occipital condyles. So when you're talking about the axis, the atlas, you're not wrong. This is flared out more than what the axis is. Because remember, this twists just a little bit, the axis does. It's probably just a misconception that that axis, that's got to be up on top, that swivels. No, it's actually the second one. The atlas is flared out with those facets of occipital condyles, because I think that's what it said in your book. I think it did say facet of occipital condyle. And what that means, it's making an articulation underneath the skull with the occipital condyle structures. Okay, so then as you move further down, all vertebrae have something in common. This. Sticking out to the side. Structures, not holes. Structures. It's a process. It's a process. Yeah. So that's because there's two of them. There's one on each side. So transverse means it goes out from the side. Spinous process sticks out from the back. Okay? So yes, the majority of them have that in common, with the exception of, I suppose you could say, the atlas and the axis. Really, it's kind of hard to tell because they've got a bolt going through here to attach to, I suppose, that aluminum square tubing that goes through there. So yes, the atlas, the axis, transverse process says on the side, Spinous process says going down the posterior or dorsal side, okay? And then the hole right in the middle, going down the vertebral column. Okay, foramen always means hole, and the vertebral foramen means it's what the spinal column is actually going through. So they have that in common, and then probably the most noticeable of the other foramen would be in the thoracic portion, okay? And again, if it's another type of foramen, that means a hole, which means when you're talking about different types of nerve tracts that branch off of. They do down here as well, but we just associate that mainly with the thoracic side because the heart's there, the diaphragm's there. Does the lung need stimulation? Are the lungs muscle tissue or epithelial tissue? It's a trick question. What causes, and that's a chemistry question, we talk about that. What causes the lungs to expand? It's a drop in pressure from the contraction of this muscle. It starts with a D. And it's right here, right at the base of the thoracic cavity. It actually separates the thoracic from the abdominal cavity. You're going to say, I knew that. Something. Diaphragm. Yeah, that actually separates these two cavities. So you'd have a nerve tract that branches off here that stimulates the diaphragm so breathing continues. And that nerve tract, does that go up to the cerebral cortex or does it go to a different portion of the brain? When it comes to breathing, it's a vital reflex center, so it doesn't go to the cerebellum, it doesn't go to the cerebral cortex. Certainly it doesn't go to the diencephalinon. The only portion that's left is where the spinal column attaches to the brain, and that short section's called what? It's a something stem. It's a brain stem. We have a pons, okay, a midbrain, and then the medulla. And the medulla is what actually drives your vital reflex centers. Okay, so then moving forward, okay, is what else do we have here? Oh, we don't want to forget the anterior side. We don't have the clavicle on here because that's part of the appendicular skeleton, but we do have, there's 4 identifications here. That's 1, 2, 3, I can't do that very well, and then down here, xiphoid process. 4 identifications there. The whole thing, sternum, manubrium, yep, xiphoid process. Okay, then we have a set of these. I'm telling this person a joke, it's a real rib tickler. Ha, ha, we told a funny. Or you see my side, it's splitting open. That's what we're, yeah, side splitting joke, yeah, yep. Okay, so how do you tell the difference between these 3 types of ribs? Okay. Yep. So if we were to play a game, where is the last true rib? You tell me when to stop. Right here? So close. This one, okay? Because as this comes across, this one still has a direct attachment. It's these here that are attaching to that one that make that false ribs. Sorry, I almost said floating. False ribs. Okay, then on the very bottom, what do we've got? These 2, sacrum, coccyx, okay? These 5, okay? and then these 12, thoracic. Now, one of the things that visually, a way to keep them separate, the thoracic vertebrae, other than, because size would be pretty tough to be able to see the difference, unless you're looking for something very specific. Because if we're talking about C7, okay, what do you suppose that means? The seventh one of what? Right. So that means then, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay. There might have been 2. Actually, looks like it's more so this one, okay. So, well, I think it's this one, because it's hard to tell which one of these is, I might have just miscounted. 1, 2, because this darn bolt is throwing me off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So when we talk about T1, that's not much difference in size between C7 and T1, but you can tell the difference because this guy has something that a cervical vertebrae does not have and a lumbar vertebrae does not have. In other words, it's a specific type of articulation. Okay? So when we look at this, you have to look on the front side, okay? Because these all have a specific name too. What are they called? Yeah, that's true. But the whole thing is called a rib. But when we're talking about this specific structure, this is still cartilage. This is the body of the rib, but still, we talked about this just once yesterday. It was something extremity. Starts with an S. Because where do they attach? Right. So these have sternal extremities, and then they also have articular facets with what? What are these called again? Sternal extremities up here, then the backside is our superior articular facet of the rib. Yeah, I think it says that in the book. I just want to, let's make sure that we've got that. Okay, so, I mean, and this is difficult. It's a lot to remember, okay? And it's just one of them things to where, oh God, I don't want to say anything because I'm always wrong. Well, not in this case, okay? But it, like I said, this takes a lot of remembering. And oh, that's why I went the wrong way. The front is the sternal extremity, and the back is superior articular facet of the rib. Okay, why? Oh, I just saw skeletal system. It says joints of the skeletal system. That's why I'm having a problem. Okay, so when we look, okay, at page 230, okay, what that means then is you have, can't see anything, because when you look at page 230, it's got these 3 identifications here. It's small, so it's probably got to be a cervical vertebrae. A little larger, yes, a thoracic. Then the largest is all the lumbar. But one of the reasons that, other than size, that you can tell the difference is these guys here, the thoracic vertebrae, have what we call the readers here. They've got the what's called the superior articular facet, okay? And then Another identification would be facet that articulates with rib tubercle. If those are not on there, let's make sure that we are getting those on there, because we would like to think that's easy identifications. Okay? Facet that articulates with rib tubercle. So when you look at page 234, there it's illustrating how this rib is actually articulating with a thoracic vertebrae on page 234. Okay? And they call it the shaft of the rib. I prefer body for that. I mean, it means the same thing, but we're just going to be consistent, say that on 234. And then you also have what's called the head of the rib, okay? That should be on there as well. And then that would be it, okay? So the shaft means body. I'll go ahead and get this back over here. Come on. Okay. All right. So be a little easier to see on page 234, okay? And it's got these structures here. It's saying this is the shaft, but we want to know that as the body, okay? Then as we look up here, it's called the head or head of the rib, and then it also has the tubercle, and that's what that's fitting on when it comes to that of the rib, okay? Because we had just read that. The superior articular facet, okay, and facet articulates with rib tubercle, okay. So important to know those identifications. Okay, we've gone over everything now. A lot of them get repeated. In other words, how many times do you think you could see the term body on there? See, even if we were just to use body in different identifications, okay, vertebrae, I meant cervical, lumbar, and thoracic, not in that order, should be cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. Those all have a body. Is there another bone structure that's got a body? The sternum. And then is there one more structure that's got a body? The rib, okay? And that's just the curve going towards the front, if you want to call it that. And then you have the sternal extremity where it actually attaches to the sternum. Okay?
So the head of the rib is actually in the back.
That is correct. Okay? So on your book on page 234 it says anterior end or sternal end. But to me, sternal extremity is a better way of looking at that. Okay? All right. We're up to 19 minutes now. Should we just throw some general terms out there and just as one final review because it's 10 o'clock? Or do you just want this time on your own? You tell me.
Is the superior whatever?
Okay, I had just paused this for just a moment. The question was, what's the difference between the superior articular facet and then facet that articulates with rib tubercle? One way to look at this is when you look at the superior articular facet, that locks your vertebral column together. Okay, so when we say that it locks it together, that's why you have these structures right here. okay, right outside of that vertebral foramen. That's the superior articular facet. That's how your vertebral column gets locked together, okay? So the reason that that is significant is, do you suppose that that's only unique to thoracic vertebrae? When we talk about the vertebral column, you shook your head no. That would be correct. In other words, the cervical vertebrae have it, the lumbar vertebrae have it, and of course the thoracic vertebrae have it. The superior articular facet locks your vertebral column together with the one right above it. And then the facet that articulates with rib tubercle, that is on the transverse process. And when you look at that structure, okay, when you see the tubercle of the rib, which is right here, okay, that's what we're talking about, superior articular facet with rib tubercle. That's what that's referring to. Okay, I know it's a lot of verbiage, a lot of words, but that's how you can tell the difference. All right.
Can you show on that thing what the superior articular facet is?
We can try, because the question was, can you see that superior articular facet? And the answer is no. And the reason I said that we can try is because, I think it's better if I just get on this side, okay? Because notice that this spinal column is already locked together. So if you were to see that, it's in here, and it's probably right in front of these bolts or screws or whatever this is that holds these ribs in here. So it's something that you can't see. It's just right behind my finger here. Okay, and again, that's what's locking these vertebrae together. Then when you talk about the other structure, we said it's on the transverse process, so it has to be on the side. We're talking about the superior articular facet with rib tubercle. Because this is the tubercle of the rib, this would be the superior articular facet on rib tubercle. Okay, so the superior articular facet is locking the vertebral column together. Superior articular facet with rib tubercle actually comes in contact with that tubercle of the rib. That's how you can tell the difference. All right. So left side, we're ready. Left middle, and then right outside. Okay, so we have a few minutes. The rest of the time then is yours.